Welcome to True Crime. It's a hot day in July 2025 on a deserted patch of land just outside Houston, Texas. A man is standing next to a freshly dug, waist-deep hole. His hands are tied behind his back as he calmly lies down in the grave. Two detectives then raise their cameras, the shutters clicking over and over, capturing the man in his own. This isn't a crime scene reenactment, not in the way you're thinking. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It's a trap meticulously set by the police with the help of the victim himself, all to catch the person who was secretly plotting to end his life. And the most shocking part? The mastermind was none other than his own wife. Hello everyone, this is Vonam, and welcome back to True Crime. The man we were just talking about is Ramon Sosa, born in 1967. Before all this went down, he was a professional boxer who later became one of the most well-known boxing coaches in Southeast Texas. Ramon owned two successful boxing gyms, and business was steady. But Ramon wasn't born in the States. He came from Puerto Rico, a self-governing U.S. territory in the Caribbean. The people there are U.S. citizens, but they hold tight to their vibrant Spanish-speaking culture and Latin traditions. With limited economic opportunities for decades, boxing was seen as a way out for countless young men in Puerto Rico. The island has produced a long line of world champions like Trinidad, Cotto, Serrano, and Vasquez from the 1990s all the way through the 2000s. Ramon grew up in the middle of all that. At just 17 years old, he stepped into the world of professional boxing. Thanks to his lightning-fast punches and an impressive fighting record, Ramon earned the nickname the Puerto Rican Express. But his career in the ring didn't last as long as he'd hoped. Before he even turned 30, Ramon had to hang up his gloves. After retiring, Ramon, his first wife, and their 3 kids moved to Texas. He decided to pivot, shifting his focus to coaching and opening his first boxing gym in the city of Houston. However, just as they were settling in, his first marriage suddenly fell apart in the year 2000. His wife went back to Puerto Rico, while their 3 kids stayed in the U.S. With Ramon, the years that followed were an uphill battle. Ramon was struggling to keep the gym afloat, while raising 3 kids all on his own. Life was anything but easy. Luckily, he had a solid foundation in boxing and a real gift for coaching. The fighters Ramon trained consistently brought home titles from major tournaments. Even the legendary Mike Tyson once publicly praised his coaching abilities. With that kind of recognition, Ramon's gym started filling up with students, and his business finally started to thrive. As his kids got older and more independent, Ramon finally found some time for himself again. One evening in 2007, after a long, exhausting day, he stopped by a Latin dance club to unwind with a couple of drinks. It was there that Ramon met the woman who had become his second wife, Lulu, the same woman who, years later, would orchestrate a plot to have him murdered. Lulu was 7 years younger than Ramon. Her full name was Maria de Lourdes Dorantes. Because her name was a bit of a mouthful, everyone just shortened it from Lourdes to Lulu. She was tall and slender, with striking, long black hair. The moment Ramon walked into the club that night, he saw Lulu dancing in the middle of the floor. Instantly, his eyes were locked on her. Ramon was dressed sharp that night too. A nice jacket, an expensive watch on his wrist. He ordered a beer and took a seat at the bar closest to the dance floor, just to quietly watch her lose herself in the music. When the song ended, Lulu left the floor, and as if by fate, she accidentally stepped right on Ramon's foot. Her heels, probably about 6 inches high, sent a sharp pain through him. Realizing she'd hurt someone, Lulu apologized over and over, flustered, asking him what she could do. Ramon just smiled and said, "Simple. You can make it up to me with one dance." And just like that, a fire was lit between them. In the days that followed, Lulu was by Ramon's side every night, sharing drinks with him. She'd pour his wine, rub his shoulders, and even massage his feet. For a man who worked from sunup to sundown, who'd raised 3 kids alone and hadn't felt the warmth of a real partnership in years, that kind of affection was completely disarming. Whether Lulu was being genuine at that moment, it's hard to say. But one thing was clear: Ramon was falling deeply for her. Or maybe it's more accurate to say he was slowly walking into the sweet trap she had laid. Lulu was from Mexico, and like Ramon, her native tongue was Spanish. Like many undocumented immigrants, She had entered the U.S. on a tourist visa and simply stayed. Without a legal work permit, she made a living cleaning hotel rooms and doing massage therapy. Before she met Ramon, Lulu had already been through one, marriage, and had 2 teenage kids who lived with her. In 2009, Ramon and Lulu officially got married. Together, they opened up a second boxing gym. In commercials that aired on local channels, on the local scene, they were the perfect power couple, always appearing together, presenting a united, friendly, and confident front for the gym, even though she'd never boxed a day in her life. Lulu was a natural athlete with a background in dance. It didn't take long for her to step up and take charge of the women's fitness boxing classes. Every day, Lulu was leading classes, becoming a major force in bringing in new clients. With Lulu's help, their 2 boxing gyms quickly signed up several hundred members, bringing in a steady cash flow of about $20,000 a month. Life was sweet, and business was booming. You could say it was the absolute peak of Ramon's life. The money just kept rolling in. The couple bought a brand new 2-story house. Ramon got himself a powerful motorcycle and even a Bentley. He was becoming a well-known figure in the community, and Lulu wasn't sitting on the sidelines. She was constantly shopping for new clothes and luxury items. But even with all the spending, it felt like they had everything under control. But you know how the saying goes, great fortune often hides the seeds of disaster. After they got married, Ramon sponsored Lulu, her mother, and her 2 kids for their U.S. green cards. The whole process took about 3 years, but Ramon had no idea that this waiting period would turn out to be the last happy years of his life. The moment Lulu, her mother, and her children all had their green cards in hand, Lulu's attitude toward Ramon began to change, and it was a dramatic shift. Bitter arguments became a regular thing, sometimes blowing up over the smallest, most insignificant issues. Ramon would later recall that Lulu knew exactly how to push his buttons. On one vacation, another fight broke out. When Lulu said she was going to break out, call her mother, Ramon grabbed the phone from her, insisting that this was a private matter between a husband and wife, and no one else needed to be involved. In the struggle, he accidentally hurt her arm. Without a moment's hesitation, Lulu ran downstairs, called hotel security, and claimed Ramon had assaulted her. After hearing both sides of the story, the head of security simply told them to sleep in separate rooms for the night. It wasn't long before something else happened. Back at home, Lulu provoked him until Ramon finally snapped and punched a door in frustration. Once again, Lulu called the police, telling them he'd hit her and pointing to some scratches on her body. Ramon flatly denied it, telling the police he had never and would never hit a woman. He explained he just got angry and took it out on the door. Besides, as a former professional boxer, if he had really laid a hand on her, the injuries would have been a hell of a lot worse than a few scratches. In the end, the police decided Lulu's injuries weren't clear enough to prove an assault had occurred, so they dropped the case. Then, in May of 2015, Lulu officially filed for divorce, demanding 100% of their assets. To Ramon, this was beyond unreasonable. He made it clear he'd already hired a lawyer, and that if they were getting a divorce, it would be handled by the book, through the courts. The assets would be split right down the middle, but Lulu wouldn't budge. She wanted it all. And that's the moment when everything started to spiral out of control. At the same time, a terrifying plot was beginning to form inside Lulu's mind. Around that time, Ramon's gym had launched a non-profit project for at-risk teens called the Young Boxing Stars Training Camp. The program was designed to pull kids out of street gangs or troubled homes, giving them a place to train in boxing for free. The hope was to set them on a path toward professional sports and keep them away from a life of crime. The camp quickly earned respect within the local boxing community and was praised by the public. Because of its success, Ramon secured funding from philanthropists and local businesses. But in an effort to pressure Ramon into meeting her demands, Lulu started making trouble. She went directly to the project sponsors and accused Ramon of embezzling the funds. In the end, her accusations spooked the sponsors, who decided to pull their funding, forcing the program to shut down. But she wasn't done yet. Lulu also started spreading rumors to members at the gym, telling them that Ramon was abusive, that he even mistreated her mother and his own children. One of the people forced to listen to these stories was a young man named Mundo. He was one of the kids who had benefited directly from the youth training camp, and he was also one of Ramon's proudest students. Because Mundo was around the same age as his own kids and also came from Puerto Rico, Ramon always treated him like a son. And as the coach's wife, Lulu had earned Mundo's complete respect. At first, based on everything he knew about Ramon, Mundo figured Lulu was just saying things in the heat of the moment after a bad fight. But as things kept escalating, Mundo started to realize this was something far more serious. He had no idea that he was about to become the key figure who would turn the entire case on its head. For his own safety throughout the ordeal, he remained anonymous, and it's very likely that even the name Mundo was just an alias. Mundo was born into an incredibly poor and unstable family. From a young age, he was surrounded by drugs and street fights. He'd been in a gang and had even done a short stint in jail. But as he got older, he started to realize he knew he couldn't go on living like this. Then, in 2010, a flicker of hope, Mundo saw a flyer for a boxing gym run by a man named Ramon. It was there he met Ramon and decided to pin his last hopes on boxing, praying the sport could give him a purpose and pull him away from a life of crime. Ramon took Mundo under his wing completely. He was always invited over for dinner, treated like one of the family. Through Ramon, Mundo started to feel the kind of affection he'd been missing his entire childhood, the feeling of having a real father. The turning point came about 3 months after Lulu had asked for a divorce. One night in June of 2015, Mundo came to the gym, just like any other day. Lulu was sitting in the office with her teenage daughter. They were talking about another kid at the gym, a boy who once mentioned his uncle was a shot caller in a local Mexican gang, the kind of guy who took money to make problems go away. When Mundo walked in, Lulu didn't even try to be subtle. She turned and asked him straight up, "Hey, do you know that kid's uncle? I need him to take care of a problem for me." Even though Lulu didn't spell it out, Mundo knew instantly. The problem she wanted taken care of was Ramon. To be sure, Mundo started to gently prod her, encouraging her to open up more. He never imagined that Lulu would actually confide in him, that she didn't see him as an outsider at all. The very next day, Lulu called Mundo into her office again. She told him she was exhausted, completely fed up with her life. Lulu said she just wanted Ramon out of her life. She wished the police would arrest him, or that someone would just make him disappear. Mundo asked her, "Disappear? What do you mean by disappear?" As he spoke, he raised his hand, making a finger gun. Lulu's response was immediate. "Yeah, exactly like that." That single moment left Mundo completely frozen. He couldn't believe the relationship between the man he looked up to as a father and his wife had crumbled to this. Mundo walked back out to the training floor and started hitting the heavy bag, but his mind was a mess. He understood that, now that Lulu had told him this, if he didn't do something, she was just going to find someone else to carry out her plan. There was no way Mundo could let Ramon walk into a trap like that. So, after his workout that day, Mundo went back into the office and said to Lulu, "I don't know that kid's uncle, but I know someone else who can help you with that." Right then and there, a plan was taking shape in Mundo's head, not to help Lulu, but to stop her. Mundo told Lulu he knew a heavy hitter in the criminal underworld named Paco. For the right price, this guy could handle anything. Hearing this, Lulu barely hesitated. She immediately told Mundo to go ahead and that she'd be waiting to hear from him. The second he left the boxing gym, Mundo made a call, but that call wasn't going to some gangster named Paco. The whole story was a complete fabrication. The person Mundo called was Ramon himself. On the phone, Mundo laid it out plainly. "Your wife is trying to have you killed." At first, Ramon was in total disbelief, thinking Mundo had to be joking. But Mundo quickly explained, his voice dead serious, that he'd been around people who genuinely wanted to kill, and he'd seen that look in their eyes. According to Mundo, Lulu's eyes had that exact same look. Ramon knew Mundo's character inside and out. He knew this wasn't a kid who made jokes like this. Hearing that, Ramon went cold. In that instant, his mind flashed back to his wedding day. Lulu's own mother had leaned in close and whispered something in his ear. "She's your problem now." Ramon couldn't believe that the woman who once loved him so deeply could become so ruthless. He was furious, confused, and had absolutely no idea what to do. Mundo went on, telling him that he'd thought of a plan that could get Ramon through this, a way to save his life. But for it to work, they would have to put on a show together. According to the plan, Mundo told Ramon to buy 2 burner phones, one for each of them. Ramon would play the role of the crime boss, Paco. Of course, he would never show his face or even make a call. This was a dirty business. Text messages would be enough to make Lulu believe Paco was real, and the only thing left to negotiate was the price. The next day, right in front of Lulu, Mundo used his burner phone to text the hitman Paco, a completely fictional character. Lulu had no idea that the target she was trying to eliminate was at that very moment holding the other phone, reading every single word she was inspiring. After some back and forth, Paco Ramon agreed to take the job. In exchange, Lulu would pay him $3,000 in cash, a couple of Ramon's own watches, some jewelry, and even his pickup truck. In that moment, Ramon's mind was a chaotic storm of emotions. He was terrified, his heart felt like ice, and he even felt a bitter, twisted sense of irony. As he watched his ex-wife gather up each item using his own property to hire someone to kill him, Ramon knew for certain Lulu was absolutely determined to see him dead. Ramon and Mundo kept the act going, dragging out the play. They were doing it for one reason. They had decided to reel her in, to gather undeniable proof that Lulu had hired a hitman to kill her husband and then turn it all over to the police. Over the next few days, every time Mundo met or spoke with Lulu, he was recording. He secretly recorded the entire conversation. During one of the recordings, Mundo asked Lulu, just to be sure, if she was absolutely certain about this. "You really want him dead?" Lulu didn't hesitate for a second. Yes, they have to do it. I don't care. I'll pay." Lulu was completely convinced that Mundo was on her side, so she kept talking, revealing more and more of her chilling plan. Lulu explained that if Ramon died, she'd collect on his life insurance policy and get his pension for the rest of her life. She even had the nerve to call Ramon's death her retirement plan. Lulu stressed that everything had to be taken care of before the 22nd of the month, because that was the day Ramon was set to sign the final divorce papers. Once that ink was dry, all of his assets would go to his children after he died, not to her. Every single one of these cold, calculated thoughts was spoken without a hint of shame, and Mundo recorded every last word. The next day, Lulu handed Mundo $100 and told him to buy the weapon for Paco to carry out the plan. The second he had the money, Mundo went straight to Ramon. After talking it over, they both agreed it was time to go. To the police. Lulu handing over cash for the murder weapon meant the plot was officially in motion, more than enough for the police to intervene. On May 1st, 2015, Ramon and Mundo walked into the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. Mundo spent over an hour laying out the whole story, from the moment Lulu first suggested hiring a killer to every single step of her plan. As he talked, he played the police all of the audio recordings and handed over the $100 Lulu had given him. A detective asked Ramon what exactly was going on. Ramon explained that he and his wife were going through a divorce, one that was supposed to be amicable. The problem was, Lulu wanted everything. Ramon said that the police would hear it clearly in the recordings he had a pretty big pension. Mundo added that on top of the pension, there was also a life insurance policy on Ramon. Then, Mundo handed the police a burner phone, explaining that this was the phone Ramon was using to continue playing the role of the hitman, Paco. Every text message exchanged with Lulu was saved on that phone. A detective turned to Mundo and asked him why he'd gotten himself so deeply involved in this, even creating such a complicated story. Mundo answered without hesitation that he was afraid if he didn't step in, Lulu would just find someone else to follow through with the plan, and Ramon would most likely be murdered. The investigators were genuinely shocked by the case. Throughout their careers, they had handled their fair share of murder-for-hire plots, but they had almost never seen a plan so bizarre and cold-blooded. Because of this, they repeatedly asked Mundo if Lulu had ever directly used the words kill or dead when talking about Ramon. In response, Mundo pulled out his phone and showed the investigators the text messages Lulu had sent. On the screen, the Spanish word for death was right there in plain sight. After a thorough discussion, the two investigators concluded that Lulu would very likely find a way to have Ramon killed before the 22nd of the month. However, the police couldn't rush to arrest her. The reason was that, at that moment, the evidence they had collected wasn't solid enough to guarantee a conviction in court. To completely shut down this plot, they needed to put Lulu away with a case that was impossible to deny. Therefore, the police asked Mundo to keep communicating with Lulu and to record more conversations to strengthen the evidence. As the meeting was coming to an end, Mundo was frank, sharing that he really didn't want to be involved anymore. He clearly stated his concerns. He'd been a gang member and had a criminal record. That past was the very reason Lulu trusted him and came to him in the first place. But if word got out that he was helping Ramon, especially if it reached the ears of the people he used to run with in the gang, he would be seen as a snitch, an unforgivable sin in the criminal underworld. He knew this could put him in extreme danger. Even though he was willing to take the risk, Mundo asked the police to keep his identity confidential. The investigators agreed to his request. Over the next 3 weeks, Mundo recorded 12 more conversations with Lulu. After listening to all the new recordings, the police knew Lulu's motive for murder was now crystal clear. However, audio evidence alone still wasn't enough. They needed visual evidence to lock this case up tight. And that's when the plan entered its next stage, arranging a face-to-face meeting between the hitman, Paco, and Lulu. Because from the beginning, Lulu had no idea what Paco looked like. The lead investigator, Atkins, said he would arrange for an undercover officer to play the part of Paco. However, Mundo still had to be there to make the whole act look as authentic as possible. Mundo arranged to meet Lulu on the evening of the 20th in a supermarket parking lot. Before heading to the meeting spot, Lulu stopped by a nearby ATM to withdraw cash, which would serve as the down payment for the murder for hire. Before the meeting, the police fitted Mundo with a hidden camera. When they met, Lulu and Mundo walked together toward a pickup truck being driven by the undercover cop playing Paco. After a few brief words, Lulu slid the down payment into Paco's hand. The undercover cop later recalled asking Lulu if she just wanted Ramon roughed up a bit. Lulu shot back instantly without a flicker of doubt. No, she just wanted Ramon to disappear as quickly as possible. After getting out of the car, Lulu pulled Mundo aside with one last instruction. When Ramon was dead, make sure to grab the Instrac watch he always wore. She stressed that it was incredibly valuable. This entire exchange was captured on both video and audio. From a different unmarked police car, investigators also filmed the moment Lulu handed over the blood money. In reality, the second she passed him that cash for the hit, she had officially crossed the legal line into criminal conspiracy. Technically, the police could have arrested her right then and there. However, investigator Atkins decided to play it safe. He knew that despite Lulu's obvious greed and cruelty, she had a certain image. She was a good-looking mother of 2 with no criminal record. In front of a jury, it was entirely possible she'd be met with sympathy. Because of that, Atkins decided this play had to continue. He believed that to lock this case down, they needed a piece of evidence so decisive it would be impossible to refute. They had to make Lulu believe Ramon had truly been eliminated. And so, the investigators got to work. It sounds unbelievable, but they went online and watched tutorial videos made by teenagers to learn how to mix fake blood using syrup and food coloring. This stuff was originally meant for kids' Halloween costumes, but when they applied it in the field, the result was shockingly realistic. The next day, investigators drove Ramon out to a desolate spot on the outskirts of Houston. They picked an area with soft ground, and each grabbing a shovel, they dug a deep hole that looked for all the world like a shallow grave. Atkins tied Ramon's hands behind his back, had him lie in the hole, and told him to close his eyes. To make it even more real, they created a fake wound on his temple that looked exactly like a bullet hole, then poured the fake blood over it. Looking at it, with the naked eye, you couldn't find a single flaw. Atkins told Ramon to hold that pose, then snapped dozens of photos from every angle. Ramon later said that as he lay there with his eyes closed, in a grave he'd helped dig, he kept asking himself, "What am I doing here? How could a marriage drive me to this?" It was in that very moment that he finally accepted a bitter truth. Lulu had never loved him. She was just using him. On July 22nd, Paco, the undercover hitman, was ready to deliver the proof to Lulu. She agreed to meet in his car. The undercover officer spoke to her in Spanish. "It's done," he said. "Ramon has been dealt with." That morning, Lulu didn't show the slightest hint of surprise. She just calmly said that she had brought the rest of the money. At that point, the officer pulled out his phone. Lulu looked at the pictures of Ramon lying in the grave. After studying them for a moment, she suddenly asked a question. He's not ever waking up again, right? And then, in a moment that sent a shiver down the spine of everyone watching the case, Lulu erupted in laughter, throwing her hands in the air as if she'd just won the lottery. Investigators would later say that watching that video back gave them goosebumps. To them, this woman was genuinely terrifying. The next morning, police instructed Ramon to go into hiding immediately. He couldn't be seen by or contact anyone until Lulu was arrested. Not even his own mother or his 3 children knew where he was. In everyone's eyes, Ramon had simply vanished. Meanwhile, investigators went directly to the boxing gym, where Lulu showed up as usual. An officer walked in and introduced himself as Investigator Martinez from the Montgomery Police Department. He asked if he could speak with her privately for a minute, and Lulu agreed. During their conversation, the police asked when she last saw Ramon. Lulu replied that it was July 15th and claimed she hadn't had any contact with him in the last 24 hours. Immediately after, the investigator told Lulu to stand up and informed her she was under arrest by order of the court. In front of her own mother and her teenage daughter, Lulu was handcuffed and placed in a police car. Only then was Ramon allowed to call his children and tell them the entire truth. On the other end of the phone, his kids broke down in tears. Lulu's lawyer later went on the counterattack, accusing Ramon of long-term domestic abuse. The claim was that Lulu was treated so terribly, she had no other choice but to hire someone to kill her husband. It was clear the defense hoped to appeal to the jury's emotions. However, Ramon fiercely denied the allegations. He stated that he only threw punches in the boxing ring and had never hit a woman. That was his principle in life. At the same time, Lulu's side failed to produce any convincing evidence of his alleged violence. Friends, family, and acquaintances all confirmed that Ramon was a kind husband who had never mistreated Lulu. Investigator Adkins asserted that with the video, audio recordings, and Lulu's direct payment for the murder, her guilt was undeniable. Her cold-blooded attitude also made the chances of her getting any sympathy from the jury almost zero. While she awaited trial, the domestic abuse allegations against Ramon were dismissed. As it turned out, the divorce was just Lulu's endgame to seize all of Ramon's assets. But once her twisted plot was exposed, the scales of justice tipped dramatically in Ramon's favor. In the end, all the major assets, the boxing gym, the house were awarded to him. Lulu was left with just a small cash settlement. After 15 months in custody, in October of 2016, a handcuffed Lulu, dressed in a pink prison jumpsuit, finally agreed to a plea deal. She stood in court, faced Ramon, and admitted to solicitation of murder. Thanks to that deal, the charge was dropped from a first-degree to a second-degree offense, which took a life sentence off the table. The judge sentenced Lulu to 20 years in prison, and throughout the entire hearing, she never once looked at Ramon. That was the last time they ever saw each other. When asked if he thought 20 years was enough, Ramon said he didn't, but he was just relieved it was all finally over and he could accept that outcome. In the aftermath, membership at Ramon's boxing gym dwindled, and he no longer felt any connection to the place he had once built with Lulu. He sold both gyms and the house, moving to the northern suburbs of Houston to start a quiet new life. The case became a local media sensation, and Ramon found himself in the spotlight, doing countless interviews. The story absolutely captivated the local community. Ramon soon became a public speaker, traveling all over to share the unbelievable story of his survival. He even wrote a book titled, "I Walked on My Own Grave," which earned a ton of positive reviews on Amazon. And in a fascinating twist, Mundo, the hero of the story, also became an author, publishing a book called My Son, Mundo. As for Lulu, after serving 8 years, in November of 2023, she was granted parole, but under incredibly strict conditions. She had to wear an electronic ankle monitor, was subject to intense supervision, and had to serve out the remainder of her sentence. But most importantly, Lulu was ordered to live in a city over 600 miles away from Ramon, with a permanent restraining order preventing her from ever contacting him again. And that's where this incredible story comes to a close. Thank you all for listening. And if you were hooked on this case, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the True Crime Cases channel. We'll see you in the next video.